I'm John from Game Life Balance US, a proud member of the GonnaGeek Network, just like the one you're listening to now. The opinions expressed are those of each individual. Check out all the other geeky podcasts at GonnaGeekNetwork.com. And get ready, because geekiness commences in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to a verified episode number 148 of Better Podcasting. On this show, we run down how to create a podcast promo with fellow GonnaGeeker Cody Gough.
In this week's Better Podcasting download, we question if video killed the podcast star.
And finally, in this week's Better Podback, we polled you on where you focus your social media efforts.
Lauren, start the show now. The true talent of Better Podcasting is here. That's me.
Welcome to Better Podcasting, a show where we talk about podcast tips, tools, and best practices to help you succeed with your podcast. What makes us different? Well, just like you, we podcast purely out of the love and fun of it. Podcasting is our hobby, and we recognize that it's yours too. We always encourage your questions and feedback, and you can find all of our contact information at betterpodcasting.com. Here's your host for the show, Stephen John Drew and Stargate Pioneer.
Welcome to episode 148 of Better Podcasting. I am Stephen John Drew, and with me, of course, is the one and only Stargate Pioneer.
It's been a good week, have a lot of great things going on, and we have had a lot of feedback, a lot of communication back and forth to our listeners. It's been a good, better podcasting week.
We have indeed. And guess what? For those of you who did not sit through the intro of the show, we are proud to say today we have a friend of ours, a fellow GonnaGeek Network member, a person who has a plethora of experience to share. That's right. Ashley Hamer's co-host, Cody Gough, is here tonight.
That's the perfect introduction. Wouldn't have expected anything less or anything more from you guys.
It's not just Ashley Hamer, it's Jonathan Martin. So it's Ashley Hamer and Jonathan Martin's co-host, Cody Gough.
All right, now that's just low. That's just low. You were fine before, but now we're getting into dangerous territory.
For those that don't know what we're talking about, Cody Gough actually started off being a hobby podcaster with Game Life Balance US. It went through a redesign, but it eventually became Game Life Balance US. But then he took his meager talents and he shilled them out, and he has become what a lot of people want to be, a professional podcaster. And in addition to also doing Game Life Balance US, he now just kind of fits in the Curiosity podcast.
Yeah, just a little bit. Curiosity Daily, technically. Our branding could use a little work on the consistency, but right now we're Curiosity Daily.
Well, I think it's great, and it is part of my daily routine. Now, before we get to the main segment of why we have you here today, just want to take a moment here to say, usually we kick off our show with a How I Save My Podcast story, but it is a jam-packed episode, so today we will not have one. But what we encourage you to do is, if you have had something go wrong with your show and you fixed it, tell us, how have you saved your podcast? And if you email that to us, that would be great in video form. You can email podcast@betterpodcasting.com, and we will play that clip on the show. The idea here isn't to publicly flog you. No, the idea is that we can all share each other's knowledge and learn from each other's mistakes. So tell us, how have you saved your podcast? And if that's not enough to entice you, think of it as you are just gloating of how you saved your podcast. We'll appeal to that side of you as well. So go ahead, send that to podcast@betterpodcasting.com. We want to know, how have you saved your podcast? But let's go ahead and move on to our featured segment.
We see questions all the time about what is the best way to grow your audience. Now, whether you're a hobby podcaster, an independent podcaster, or even a professional podcaster, or you consider your podcast your passion project, growing your audience is one of the number one questions podcasters have in general. So one of the many ways to grow your audience is to promote your show. And one of the ways to promote your show is to have at least one podcast promo, quote unquote, podcast promo, also known as a trailer or an advertisement or just the promo. So these promos can be used as a trailer for your show on iTunes. There's this new facet that you can actually go into your feed in iTunes and dedicate a small, short MP3 file as your promo. A promo can be used to advertise your show on other shows or through a podcast service like Overcast or Stitcher or something like that. If you can get involved in an ad buy, you can cross promote your show on other similar shows by using a promo swap, and you can play the promo to introduce your panel or talks at events. I actually did that last year at Indie Comic Con, I believe it was. And you can play the promo to lots of other different events, lots of other ways. So a podcast promo can be used to introduce you on a guest on another show even. So because promos are so important in a crowded podcast space with 550,000 shows and growing more each year, we've asked on our good friend and hobby podcaster, also professional podcaster on the GonnaGeek.com network, Chicago radio personality, social media expert, verified Twitter user, and Curiosity.com professional podcaster Cody Gough to help us guide through how to make an effective podcast promo.
That was an epic introduction, SP. I really appreciate that. Before I start, full credit where credit is due. Literally, I would not be doing the Curiosity podcast if it was not for better podcasting. And I'm not paid to say this. I'm not shilling. This podcast, better podcasting. I'm talking about USP. Like everything in this podcast studio, I pretty much got help picking out from SP, from the mixer to my microphone to the everything, all of the equipment, the sound design. Seriously, like I cannot thank you both enough for your feedback. When I was given a budget and I'm like, how do I build a podcast studio? And in terms of, I've got a pretty extensive radio background, some podcast background. I know how to do some promotion stuff, all that. I'm a software and audio guy. The hardware, not necessarily my forte. So this podcast was absolutely instrumental. So if you're listening to this and you've ever heard the Curiosity podcast, the Curiosity Daily, 1000% better podcasting is in the DNA of the studio that I'm sitting in right now. So thanks for that.
And I expect that my face is posted in there as well. That is my assumption, right?
You got the body-wise cutout just right there in the studio, right in front of the camera, right?
All right. So, Cody, I have a question for you, and I have a feeling that you're going to answer this question over the next 20 minutes or so. But why would I just not go and just pay that guy that's emailing me randomly telling me that he makes my podcast very good on the podcast world? Because I get a lot of those each week. He says, pay me lots of money. I make you #1 in iTunes. That's the email that I get every week.
I mean, first of all, that's prohibitively expensive. I mean, right? Aren't they charging like tens of thousands of dollars for that?
It depends. Sometimes you could get the cut rate like $500 or even $2,000. That's cut rate from $10,000. But yeah, they get those emails do go around, and all they're doing is they're pulling your email from your RSS feed and they're sending you a spam. That's all that happens.
Yeah. So promos, I think, are really under-discussed and underutilized in the podcast world. And this is a little bit where my radio background comes in. And all of my promo building skills basically come from a worksheet that I was given my sophomore or junior year in college that it's from a couple different books, but it covers message pre-production. And it comes from how it really is about 5 steps to copywriting. This is for marketing in general. This, half of it's crazy the number of skills you have to develop and cultivate to be a podcaster. It's not just understanding how to record and how to post it and how to work an RSS feed and how to distribute to different services, but you've got to become a marketer. Like you literally have to act like you've got a bachelor's degree in marketing and understand algorithms of social media, how paid advertising works, all these things. But that basic step of how do I copyright? Like, what do I do to actually sell myself to people can sometimes get lost. So that's what I'm hopefully here to kind of tell you about. So there are 5 steps to copywriting, like I kind of mentioned, and I'll just go over the top 5, and then we can pause for questions. So the first step is understanding your product or service and its competitors. So what is your podcast about? Do you understand your podcast? Can you describe your podcast in a few sentences? Because if you can't, then first of all, work on that, right? And actually, while you're copywriting, you might learn some of the weaknesses of your podcast. So this is just a healthy exercise to help you make your show better, even if you're not trying to promote it in any particular place. So first, understand what you're doing and who are you competing with, and a little bit of why. Then pick a central selling idea based on your position. You cannot be everything to everyone, even though it's really tempting in this social media world. What's the reason people are going to come to your show? What's the expertise you're bringing, or what's the angle you're taking? Those are really important to identify. And then pick your persuasive appeal, which I'll get into. We can appeal to different elements of a person's interests depending on what kind of show we're trying to sell. And there's a whole list I'll go down in a little bit. Then pick a logical production format. That I'll also get into. We'll keep it pretty simple for today. And then write the first draft. And then you're pretty good to go. But really, that base foundation of really understanding what you're doing and what you're trying to sell people, that's something that you need to understand before you kind of get started. Any questions?
Yeah, so you're asking to pick a central selling idea based on the position. What if you have multiple central selling ideas? How do you just down select just to pick the one?
So I've had to deal with this, and you have to remember that you will have more than one opportunity to advertise your show ever, right? So pick one per spot. You really want to have one clear call to action or one clear theme in an advertisement. So if I'm running a 30-second promo and I say, you should listen to my podcast. We talk about everything that ever happened in space research, and we also talk about the latest in Instagram news, and we also cover celebrity stuff. And you like go down this list, and it just keeps going and going. It's like that's not, yeah. Right? Steven started to like walk away. It's like this is too many things. I can't. By the time you get to the 5th thing, your listener has already forgotten what you started with. So pick one thing that particularly interests you at that time, or that's really relevant. Like for my lifestyle podcast, Game Life Balance US on the GonnaGeek Network, we have been reviewing SNES Classic mini games. And that's been our thing that was our thing before my co-host went and had a baby, but that's beside the point. Before he went on a mini hiatus, that was what we did every week. And so it was like, is that all our podcast is? Well, no, but it's a pretty dominant theme right now. So I remember when Better Podcasting, when you did the microphone comparison for several weeks, that might be a thing that, that doesn't mean all Better Podcasting is about is comparing microphones, but you would be advertising what you're currently doing and kind of what a primary theme is. And then a few weeks from now, you may have a different promo for it. You can always have an evergreen promo that kind of gets to the core of what you're about. Better Podcasting is a show where you learn how to podcast better, hosted by and for hobby podcasters who don't necessarily have a $25,000 budget to build a studio, or however you want to exactly package that. And you can have that evergreen that's a little more general, but that still has one unifying idea behind it, and that's how you can approach that. So just remember try not to cram too much into every spot that you're going to write.
So what I heard was you can have an evergreen a promo for your podcast and maybe a topical theme, but try not to run any more than that at any one time.
Yeah, and it kind of depends on where and how you're promoting. So I'll take a little bit of a step back and kind of talk about why promos are important. You already mentioned, you touched on a lot of this in your intro, SP, but first of all, it's a good way to promote your podcast, but another thing that it does is it kind of serves as a currency for other podcasters. So I hear a podcast I like, and I email that podcaster and I say, hey, I think our audiences are similar. I would love to run some advertising on your show. Okay, well, what can you do for me? If I don't have any money, if you're a hobby podcaster, you've got zero budget, you have very few listeners, you can almost use that promo as like a currency. So you say, you know what, you swap me your 30-second promo, I'll give you my 30-second promo. We'll just run it in the middle of our episodes, and then there we go. And having that available and handy is really helpful in promptly replying to others when you're trying to cross-promote shows, which we do a lot on the GonnaGeek Network. We cross-promote a lot of shows. It's just a good thing to have in your back pocket. The other thing it does is, let's say, even if you're running a promo for your own show and your own podcast near the end, let's say you lock in one spot where you are running promos for your show. You start to reach out to podcasters, go on Reddit or somewhere. Hey, send me a 30-second spot for your show. I'll run it in my show. You run it in mine. Great. Cool. Now all of a sudden, you've got 8, 10, 20 episodes. You just keep doing this every episode. You now have a spot for advertisers. If you decide to make the leap later that you want to start running spots on your show, or public service announcements, whatever it is, whoever wants to do it, now all of a sudden you're a little bit more marketable too. So there's a couple different reasons to kind of do that. You would also, I think, be able to, the other thing that's thinking about this is that when you've got some promos down and on the books, and you've got some copy written down, you've got a couple Google Docs, with a little 30-second pitch for your show, it's so easy to modify, right? So now if somebody comes to you and you think, wow, my show is a perfect fit for this person's audience, they want to collaborate, they want to cross-promote, but maybe I talk about a lot of Marvel Comic Universe stuff, and this is like a Green Arrow. That would have been really bad.
For those non-geeks, he's crossing universes right now. That's all.
Abort. But let's say it's like a Spider-Man podcast or Black Panther podcast, right? You can easily then modify that copy to focus on that particular character. Maybe even take a clip from a previous episode you've done talking about that character and stick it in there. So not every promo that you have has to be universal to fit in every situation, but having a couple kind of at the ready, either produced or even live read copy, they're good to have, because then you can tailor it and then you can really, really customize with other podcasts.
As you're going through the copywriting process, these 5 steps that you laid out, do you think about the placement of the ad and where that's going to be? Does that change the copywriting process at all?
Not really. The only times it's really going to come to the forefront is when you're running pre-roll, and that primarily is because of the length. So most spots, you're going to end up with a format pretty standardized, at least in the radio industry. The podcast industry is still growing and evolving, and there's certainly more flexibility. But typically, like I do my professional podcast, when an advertiser comes to our podcast and purchases advertising, it still is in the radio format, a 30-second read, a 60-second read. So you'll typically end up with either a 10 or 15-second pre-roll, or a 30 or 60-second spot that goes somewhere in the middle of the show. Ideally, no show is running a 60-second pre-roll because that's a bit much. Usually the pre-rolls, and by pre-roll, I mean literally you hit play on a podcast and that is the spot. Like you go to Better Podcasting, I hit play, I hear a 10-second advertisement for whatever show, and then it rolls. Then it begins the episode with those opening credits. So that's kind of what that does. And there's not a huge difference in running a 30-second spot in the first 10 minutes of an episode that's an hour long, or the half-hour point, or an hour into it. It's really going to be pretty standard across that. So that's the difference it's going to be. And writing the pre-roll, I mentioned that kind of understanding your podcast, being able to do an elevator pitch, being able to concisely explain what your show is about, being able to do that is the most important with a pre-roll. So try to introduce yourself, say what your podcast is about, and give a listener call to action in 10 to 15 seconds. If you can do that, you're in good shape. And if you have a really hard time doing that, if you're really struggling to do that, then maybe your show needs some work, or maybe your copywriting needs some work. Maybe something needs some work, but probably you should take a second look at your content. And I have some examples of that we'll get to in a couple minutes, right after I go through the persuasive appeals and production formats.
Before we get there, though, I have to agree with you on the copywriting and the time constraints, because as you know, I watch a lot of sailing YouTube channels, and in order to get to the sailing YouTube video, I have to go through an ad, and oftentimes I can click stop after 5 seconds. If I can't get the message in that 5 seconds, you've lost me. because I am off and I'm doing something else. And in podcasting and in some of the apps, you can select a skip forward button and you can set the time to it. A lot of them are default at 30 seconds, but you can dial that back to 5-10 seconds. People just skip through those ads. So if you can't get to it in 5 seconds, more than likely people are going to push through. Now, one thing that I need help with, because I have seen it as a weakness, is that I'm not very persuasive, because I keep on trying to get somebody to take Steven's place. And I'm just not doing that good of a job because nobody wants to take Steven's place. So how would I select my persuasive appeals?
Honestly, it just depends on what tickles your creative fancy at the time, because you want to express yourself creatively, and you want to be able to commit to something that you're interested in communicating in a particular way, not so much trying to figure out what the audience wants, right? Because that's like a pitfall a lot of us can fall into. What does my audience want? I have to tailor it to the audience. But that kind of kills creativity a little bit, right? Like, what if every painter thought to himself, I'm going to paint what my audience wants instead of I'm going to express myself, right? So I don't look at it that way. I think there's certain content that lends itself to certain persuasive appeals. Let me kind of outline what I mean by persuasive appeals. There's actually a handout. Again, my college handout I still have from my journalism class, and I emailed it to you guys. And if the listener wants to take a look after this episode airs, I believe there'll be a link to it in the show notes.
betterpodcasting.com/148.
Definitely. So definitely check this out, and it's super helpful. But this outlines 19 different persuasive appeals you can appeal to, and 9 production formats. And you can kind of mix and match them. But essentially, you pick from column A, a persuasive appeal, and then from column B, you choose a production format or a combination of production formats. When I say persuasive appeals, and again, this is a general copywriting sheet, so some of these are really not going to apply to a podcast or a show. But one of the persuasive appeals, for example, is sexual attraction. Okay, so if I want to sound really sexy, then that's my persuasive appeal. Then, like, yes, I'm appealing to someone's, attractiveness or whatever.
I think you're going to need a little bit more hair gel for that, Cody.
I could use a lot of that. But there are some other persuasive appeals that are probably better for the podcasting realm. One is, for example, companionship and affiliation. So that's something that I get very much from the GonnaGeek.com show, even though you also cover curiosity as another persuasive appeal, that you're satisfying my curiosity in terms of tech news and kind of the latest in the geek world, but also that companionship and affiliation. Like, I'm part of this GonnaGeek family that you're able to sell really well that way. Not sell, but you know what I mean? Like, get across that way. And my companions are these hosts that I've been with for a really long time. Same with Better Podcasting or lots of other podcasts. But you can also appeal to health and safety. If you're a medical podcast or a health-related podcast, like, how do I stay safe? How do I stay healthy? If I am you're actually going to hear an example in a little bit. If there's a lot of news about hackers breaking into different companies, how do I keep my credit card information safe? How do I keep my bank account safe? How do I keep my computer from getting viruses and things like that? That's something you can appeal to, almost with fear. Fear and guilt are 2 other persuasive appeals. I wouldn't necessarily recommend these, and these persuasive appeals are not particularly effective with college-age students or younger generations, by the way. But fear, like, you hear this on radio commercials all the time, right? Like, you need to get life insurance or your whole family you will die and no one will be able to pay for anything, and all the doom and gloom kind of stuff that we're kind of used to hearing on CNN. So you can pick one of these persuasive appeals. Personal enjoyment is certainly one. Personal enjoyment of luxury, pleasure, pleasant sensations, beauty and order, recreation. Recreation, again, like if I do a camping or a hunting podcast, hey, I'm going to appeal to your desire to better enjoy your hobby better. And in fact, that's really part of what this show is about, Better Podcasting, your personal enjoyment of recreation. I want to help you enjoy your hobby better and be better at it and all those things. So you choose the persuasive appeal that you think is going to kind of fit your show and your personality the best. and then choose some kind of production format. And this I won't get into as much. Really, there's just a couple different types of ways to do it. Most production formats, especially on podcast promos, are going to be straight AIDA, which is AIDA. That's attention, interest, desire, action. You get their attention, you keep their interest, you create a desire to listen to your show, and then you have a call to action. Usually, find us everywhere podcasts are found, including Apple Podcasts, et cetera, et cetera.
Well done not saying iTunes, by the way.
We've trained him well. So when you are selecting your persuasive appeal in your copywriting process, and you have these 19 or so persuasive appeal examples, do you often find yourself writing out examples for several of them and then down selecting?
Not necessarily. Sometimes I'll pick one and then I'll start to write it. And if nothing comes to me, then I'll just kind of stop, basically. And sometimes it depends on what materials I have. Sometimes I work backwards a little bit. So, for example, I interviewed an expert on, was it cybersecurity or privacy? On privacy, a privacy expert, how to keep your data private. This was after the whole, not a data breach, but it was after the news came out like a year or so ago that Facebook was sharing all your data and everybody was selling all your data. And kind of after the election, that whole everything collapsed and everybody's like, who's got your data? What's privacy? Who has any privacy? All that kind of stuff. So we had this guy and he had some good clips. And I'm like, it's going to appeal to people, a little bit of fear actually, that this guy had a couple clips that I remember from the interview. And I was like, this guy basically said, if you want privacy and you want to keep your privacy, like here's some ways to do it. In fact, Stephen, if you have it handy, it's the first link in our Google Doc. If you want to go ahead and play that to and remember, listener, this is pre-produced, so you're just going to hear the raw audio of me talking and the guest talking. This is before music is placed in. Production elements, obviously, as you've learned from better podcasting, you have to make sure you're using music that you're allowed to legally use. And the music that we ended up using, I don't know if we can use on this show. So just remember to always, produce it, have some music under it if it's a pre-recorded spot. But here's what the voice sounded like. The Facebook data breach was bad, but what if you don't have anything to hide?
This week, author and privacy expert BJ Mendelsohn tells us why your privacy is still worth protecting.
Everyone has something to hide. Can I follow you in the bathroom?
I would prefer if you didn't do that.
Exactly. Would you give me all of your email passwords?
No, I wouldn't do that.
So there's always something, and that's not to say that we're all bad or doing something bad, but we have a certain expectation of these things are private.
Worried about your privacy? We've got easy tips to give you peace of mind.
Visit curiosity.com to check out our podcast and read many articles about how to protect your data privacy. Plus, the latest science and technology news, life hacks, and everything else you're curious about. For a one-stop shop, visit curiosity.com. Yeah, so, and I would maybe give that like a 7 out of 10 or an 8 out of 10 in terms of copy, because at the end, as you probably heard, it got a little convoluted. It's like, all right, one-stop shop for all your privacy tips, also science, technology, and everything else. Like it kind of tried to be a little bit of everything. So honestly, I think if it had stopped maybe half a sentence earlier, it would have been a tighter spot. But that's what I'm talking about. That appealed to fear a little bit, probably a little bit of curiosity, but more than fear, I think health and safety. And when I talked about AIDA, attention, interest, desire, action, I think attention, I saw the look on SP's face when he said, "Can I follow you in the bathroom?" It's kind of like a, whoa, hold on a second. And yeah, it's a little sensational, but you're always going to have a guest or somebody on your show say something a little sensational. Otherwise, it's not a fun podcast, right? And then you keep their interest by him kind of explaining what he's talking about. And then you create that desire by saying, keep your data safe with all these tips. Check out this interview. And then the call to action is go check out curiosity.com to learn more. So pretty straightforward. One of the production formats listed in this handout you can find on Better Podcasting is interview. So that takes an element of the interview, but it also takes that straight AIDA and a little bit of a dramatization at the same time. So again, there's a little bit of a mix of all the different genres in there. But yeah, that's what one appeal might sound like.
And so when you're picking a clip like that to put in, because you mentioned that just got the attention right away, how do you pick where to end it?
It's time. It's really time. For this particular one, we work with a podcast network that produces some promos for us, and he's like 43 seconds is all the audio you get. So I try to find one, obviously less than 30 seconds or so, that lets, I need enough time to kind of intro it, give a quick little tease, pop it in there, see how tightly I'm going to edit it. And sometimes I'll edit what the person says slightly. If they're pausing too much or talking too slowly, I'll edit around it a little bit to make it just a little punchier. I don't think that's dishonest or anything. It's really just kind of, it's like copy editing, right? Like sometimes if you need to fit something on one page, you've just got to remove a word or two. That doesn't mean that you're, kind of ruining the original work or anything. But yeah, usually it's the time constraint. And again, you're going to want to match your promo to 10-second, 50-second. So you're probably not going to get a clip from an interview in a pre-roll most of the time, unless they talk fast and you talk fast and it's really concise. Usually not worth putting in a pre-roll though. But for a 30-second spot or a 60-second spot, you can have up to 30 seconds of a clip. You don't want to give away the whole podcast, but the way I selected that clip was what gets your attention the fastest and how can I get in and out of there? And it's just like all podcasts. Every podcast is exactly as long as it needs to be and not a second longer.
Yeah, all podcasts. Yep, you're right. 100% of them.
Another attribute that I picked up on the promo was that it was high energy all the way through. Not like screaming high energy, but energetic. It was kept your attention, kept popping throughout the entire thing. Is that pretty common with promos?
Yeah, you don't want to bore people unless it's some kind of sketch or conversation style promo, which we can also get into a little bit. If that's a specific style you're going to, then no. But, I think podcasts in general are more, most audio formats lend themselves well and reward high energy. I mean, people love better podcasting because you guys are always high energy, right? Like that's really cool. That's why I listen to GonnaGeek, because you get in there and Steven's like, boom, here's what's going on. We are into this show. It's time to go, So yeah, stick with that when you can. You never want a promo to be low energy or boring. If the guest is particularly low energy or boring, you can compensate with that with some music. So whatever stock track you're able to find, just make it a little bit faster pace maybe to stick that under there. I can play with you an actually slightly shorter version of this promo that I produced for a 30-second promo with, this is the fully produced version by the Westwood One Podcast Network, which the Curiosity Podcast is carried on. So Stephen, if you want to play, this is kind of what a more final product would sound like.
Westwood One Podcast Network, The Curiosity Podcast, Cody Gough and Ashley Hamer.
Facebook has your data, but what if you have nothing to hide?
Would you give me all of your email passwords?
This week, author BJ Mendelsohn explains how to get your privacy back and why it matters.
We have a certain expectation of these things are private.
For a one-stop shop, visit curiosity.com.
The Curiosity Podcast. Subscribe and download free on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and the Westwood One Podcast app. From Westwood One Podcast Network. Everyone's listening.
So Cody, that's pretty much the same as the other, same idea, but there's a lot more elements, a lot more produced elements with that, but it still comes across very clearly. Like, how is that accomplished where I still feel like this is high energy, I want to hear this, I get the same sort of feel, but it's got a lot more stuff in it?
Yeah, it's just professional audio production. But the guys at Westwood One are really great, and they just know how to keep it moving. If you noticed, that's a 30-second spot, and there were 3 or 4, I think, even different music beds. So it was transitioning pretty quickly. And in radio, they've always got little kind of sweeper elements in between segments. By the way, if you hear a rumbling in the background, it's because our studio is 50 feet from a Metra train track. Fun fact, fun behind the scenes. And at my house where I'm doing Game Life Balance, we're 50 feet from the Owl tracks in Chicago. So everywhere I podcast, I'm surrounded by trains. In fact, I did a live podcast at Gen Con a few years ago, and we were in a hotel that was literally next to a train station, and you could hear the train. Everywhere I have podcasts, there are trains following me. It's the weirdest thing.
Do you know how we got rid of the train in our panel that we did at Gen Con last year, Cody?
How?
We use the Sennheiser MD46, which are made to get rid of ambient noise for interviews, for professional interviews. So that's how we did it. So if you're going to podcast with noise going around, might as well get you one of those Sennheiser MD46s.
I might do that. See, this is what I'm talking about. These guys, I'm telling you, listen, if you're listening to better podcast and keep doing it, this is the best freaking podcast. God.
Okay, so question for you, Cody. So we talked about a 43-second promo, a 30-second promo. How do things all come together when you get shorter? Because I feel like a really short promo, it must be tougher to get your message across.
Yeah, let's talk pre-roll. Pre-roll, you're going to throw most of your creativity out of the window, to be totally honest. Like, you basically have enough time to say, here's who I am, here's what our show is, and you should go here to listen, and that's kind of it. So I sent you a couple pre-rolls. You can play the first one, I guess, if you want, and then we'll take a short, I'll say a couple things, and then we'll do the second one. Hi, I'm Cody Gough, host of the Curiosity Podcast. Every week, we talk to experts who can make you smarter about the world with a timely blend of culture, life hacks, and science and technology. New episodes every Tuesday, and you can listen and subscribe for free everywhere podcasts are found on the Westwood One Podcast Network. A couple different things here. So it bothers me when I have no idea who's talking to me, unless your content really is way past you. I think more often than not, you're going to want to throw your name out there, because if you're just like, hi, there's this podcast that we do, like, you don't want to sound like a disembodied voice, even if you're not a name. Like, no one knows who Cody Gough is. I'm not like famous. I'm verified on Twitter, but I mean, I'm super famous. I'm verified on Twitter, But just saying, like, it's good to say your name. So just, I don't know, just to get it out there at the start, it takes half a second. Like, literally, I'm Cody Gough. That's less than 1 second of audio right there. So get your name out there. The other thing is, you have to keep in mind first of all, where the podcast is going to run, but also how savvy your audience is. So you might have noticed that I said at the end of that, you can subscribe and download for free on curiosity.com and wherever, everywhere podcasts are found. Like, not everyone knows podcasts are free. And this is like, people listening to this are going to be like, what are you talking about? Obviously, but it's not obvious to everybody. Now, if you're running a spot on someone else's podcast that's only available on like 2 platforms, then okay, yeah, you're going to want to say where that is. But you might also keep in mind, okay, am I going to have a promo run on a podcast that's only distributing on Spotify? Because then you should say, well, you can find me on other podcasts. Or if you're focused on Spotify, or you're focused on YouTube, or you want people to listen a particular place, let's say you're obsessed with Apple Podcasts and you just want to be on Apple Podcasts for some reason, like, tell people you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, and don't say you can find us everywhere podcasts are found. So keep that in mind a little bit. And I'll talk in a minute about kind of like where you want to direct people, but we can play the other pre-roll too now if you want to get to that one real quick.
Want to get smarter in just a few minutes?
Check out our new daily podcast from Curiosity.com. I'm Cody Gough.
And I'm Ashley Hamer. On the Curiosity Daily, we satisfy your curiosity with life hacks, new research, myth busting, and more.
Listen and subscribe for free everywhere podcasts are found.
And on your Alexa flash briefing.
To the Curiosity Daily on the Westwood One Podcast Network.
Notice how fast we were talking? And that was 17 seconds. And that was 17.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you sped up your voices for that.
I didn't actually speed up our voices, but I cut out every 10th of a second pause, and that's just as tight as we could get it, In a case like that, where you're trying to pack in lots of info, maybe don't say both host names, but then it's weird. It's like, who's this guy? Who's this girl? They're just kind of talking at me. And one other quick thing, there we had the call to action. You can also listen on your Amazon Alexa flash briefing, which was a strategic decision that our company made for our daily podcast. They're less than 10 minutes long. They're on the flash briefing directory. So that's kind of why we go there. So that's another example of like, if you want to direct people to a particular place, what you would do. So that kind of covers, pre-roll and a little bit of what you want to include and a couple different ways to deliver it. I have a few different examples now, real quick, because I know we're probably going a little long. I'm talking a lot. But I have a few other spots that are a little less stiff and a little more creative to give you a couple ideas of of the possibilities of what you could do with a podcast promo that's not just an ADA, where you're not just saying like, okay, here's who I am, here's who I am, what I do, here's, listen here. Here's a couple more creative examples. You can just play any of these.
The world can be a scary place sometimes.
You're zipping along in the left-hand lane, and all of a sudden, a couch.
But don't worry, we know someone who can help you survive your week.
Noonan steps in.
He'll help you deal with problems of the modern world.
Yes, because oft times naked men will show up in your house, shower, and then make eggs.
He has all the answers.
He is 1 for 4.
And when all else fails,
I can do 1,500 jumping jacks.
So sit back, relax, and allow Brian Noonan to drop some knowledge.
Good job, Noons.
Right here on WGN.
Oh, ho, ho! This is great!
So right there, the persuasive appeal is companionship and humor and personal enjoyment, and the delivery style is humor. I mean, I just took out of context quotes, and Steven's really good at doing that too. Actually, both of you guys are really good at doing that. The GonnaGeek Network, all of our shows are just ripe with opportunities for grabbing out of context quotes in the best way possible. I mean, I love doing it. I used to do it with me and John too on our show. Like, it's just, yeah, that's what fun podcasts are all about, right? And always keep an ear out when you're listening for a really good out of context quote, because those are juicy and meaty, and you can really those can go a long way for promos, especially from the humor angle. Now, Brian's a funny host, so his show is really about humor, so that makes sense. If your show is STEM talk or some science podcast, maybe not picking random out of context quotes that are super silly and goofy, but it's a way to get people's attention, and it kind of keeps people engaged. And that's one way that you can be a little bit more creative with it. That also, by the way, my voiceover was awful because I recorded it in my living room with like 10-foot ceilings and just like, I don't know, on a Saturday morning. So I know the audio was not.
With your Blue Yeti?
Yeah. It sounds like it, right? It's so bad. But believe it or not, with music under it, it doesn't sound quite as bad. Trust, I hope. But I wouldn't recommend doing that. But put a little music under that. And for spots when you're using clips, obviously you'd pre-record that, and that would be something you send somebody to play on their show. You can go with the next one.
Dude, what are you doing?
Dude, it's the Super Mario Brothers theme.
I know, but I thought I told you to find a legitimate format for our show.
No, I know. Check this out, though. We're totally going to do a video game music show.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
I hate you.
No, Dan, seriously. I have big plans for this show. We're talking Halo 2, Dance Dance Revolution, the Final Fantasy series. We'll play jazz band, orchestra, and techno mixes of all the classics.
Okay, whatever. And it's called Insert Coin.
How about Insert Coin, your warp whistle to the next level of awesome music?
You don't get out much, do you?
Okay, how about Insert Coin, we're like the hidden characters you never thought you could unlock?
How about Insert Coin, Thursdays at 11?
All right, that's fine. Only on 94.1 The Dog.
Oh, there we go.
So it was like a very raw file, obviously, right? That's a promo for my radio show from 2006. That was a video game music show. And the final product, by the way, of that promo is phenomenal. Every time we say insert coin, I have the coin sound from from Super Mario Brothers. And then there's another version where Dan swears and he says hide and go. He doesn't say hide and go seek. He says hide and go F yourself. And I put like Mario jumping sound and bleep it out. And it like transitions from like a Mario remix to like Zelda music. It's a really great promo. But just imagine production elements on top of that. And you've got the personal enjoyment and humor, but you're also telling a story. And if you've got a 60-second spot, you've got the luxury of time so you can tell a little bit of a story. And that's really powerful because people will remember that, especially if it's a funny little sketch. I have what I consider is probably a slightly better, more finalized version of that for a different radio show I did in college. And Stephen, if you want to play that, we might as well do that now because it's very similar in feel to the other one. But this is the final product of this particular promo.
For years, musical artists have sent their music to the staff of 94.1 The Dog.
Hey, what are all these CDs lying around the office?
Thousands of hours of music are locked in our archives.
Why are you talking like that?
But the time has come to unlock The Vault.
The Vault? That'd be a cool name for a show.
This Monday,
I'm gonna listen to some of these CDs.
it will be time to open
And I'll play them on a show called
The Vault.
Check out The Vault with me, Corey.
And Cody G.
Mondays at 6, only on 94.1
The Dog.
Yeah, my radio name in college was Cody G. I had shoulder-length hair, and I played saxophone. And when this was discovered, I became Kenny G's grandson or something.
And then you went on to sell appliances.
Yeah, basically. But yeah, as you can hear from that, it's another like little sketch, and it's like, here's the story of the show. You kind of know what to expect. Oddly, for an indie music show, probably would have made a little more sense thematically to play some indie music and not just have like a weird kind of mysterious background thing, but you can play around with it. So take your show, make a little sketch with your co-host. If you can come up with something funny, throw some Halloween music behind there around the holidays, throw some Christmas music if you've got a Christmas special, although most people take some time off around the holidays. You know, you can liven it up, you can spice it up, you can have a little bit of personality, but all it is really is about having fun. And whether you're telling a story or you're terrifying people and telling them that they're going to die from, you know, some horrible disease if they don't listen to your show, however you're trying to appeal to them, there are a lot of different ways to approach a promo. So don't just feel like you're locked down to, this is my name, this is my show, listen on Apple Podcasts, like, because people get sick of that eventually. And there's going to be more and more promos like that come out. We actually just got copy at Curiosity for a promo for another podcast we're going to cross promote in the next few weeks. And it's very straight, like, hey, listen to this show. Like, here's what it's about. Here's what we do on it. And like, that's great, but it's a little harder to kind of stand out when you're doing that. So, you know, make sure you've got your pre-roll. The pre-roll is really the key. But then when it comes to 30 and 60 second spots, just, you know, do what you can. And by the way, you heard in those radio spots, the call to action was to listen to the days of the week if it's an appointment kind of thing. But in your podcast, you know, tell them we drop on Tuesdays or we drop on Wednesdays. If there's a certain day of the week and you want to maximize the number of people that are hitting your show one day a week, I actually couldn't tell you what day of the week any of the shows I listen to release, except for Bill Burr's Monday Morning Podcast, because guess what? It's called Bill Burr's Monday Morning Podcast. But like, I literally don't remember what day of the week, even like the GonnaGeek.com podcast comes out. I just know once a week it pops up and I love it. But I'm so bad at keeping track. So that's optional. You know, I don't know that it matters to everybody what day of the week. And remember, every piece of information you give, if you keep every piece of information valuable, then that's going to impact people more. So if you think to yourself, you know, people don't care that much what day of the week something comes out, then don't waste copy on it. Don't waste time telling people we drop every Tuesday. Just tell them like every week, listen to us. Plus, then you've got some flexibility in the future. So if someone hears your show and you decide to move your day of the week a couple weeks later, then it's like, okay, well, now I don't have to update all the spots that I've got and all the copy and everything.
Well, that's great and some really good advice. And I'm going to go ahead and ask you one question. I know you don't have the clip ready, but I'm sure you can think of the time and give us the synopsis. Thinking back, what is your most moment of a promo that you built? There must be one that you put together and you listened to after and you just went, what was I thinking?
A little background. I started my radio career producing an overnight show, and we had a lot of time to fill. Some of the shows we did were 6 hours long. And overnights, there aren't that many commercials. So think about that. You're essentially talking for 6 hours straight. That was crazy for the host. And he's like, I need like a 30-second break here and there. So we'd run a couple public service announcements, but I thought it'd be fun. I'll design a couple like custom PSAs. So the thing you heard earlier, the Noonan promo that we played, that was kind of like, he's got all the answers, all that stuff. That's the kind of thing I would just produce for fun, and we would just play it in the middle of our show. There were a couple of those that didn't quite hit the mark, where I would take some out of context quotes, I'd mix it together, and it was like, this isn't that funny. It's not really accomplishing a lot. I don't think it's building the brand or really, you know, making our audience super engaged. So there were a couple, but you know, at least I tried them. And there's a lot of stuff that I find hilarious that Brian just thought was like kind of okay, like whatever. So that was there were a couple things there. The one really cringy thing that happened, actually, I like this. We used to pretend. To decide who would close the show and sign off and be like, hey, thanks for listening, we would fight each other. We would like we'd play a bunch of sound effects of like a rumble with like punch and kick sound effects from a video game, and then come back from the break and Brian would be like, well, I just threw Cody through a table. So we'd like act like we had this huge fight. I still get calls from listeners almost 10 years later that are like, oh, I remember back in the day when you and Brian used to fight to close the show. Like, it was really, really fun and over the top. But I don't want to say on the record that occasionally I originally used to play the clip of the guy saying, "Let's get ready to rumble." You know, that guy? I don't want to say on the record that I used that audio, but had I used that audio, I guess the guy, that's really copyrighted. Like super copyrighted, as in literally 2 years ago, another producer played that clip on WGN Radio during the day. The guy who manages the Let's Get Ready to Rumble guy found that clip, and the station had to pay like a $5,000 fine for playing that audio. So had I played that audio, which I'm not saying I did, and there were any records of that and anyone had caught it at 3 a.m. on WGN Radio, I could have cost the station a lot of money and maybe cost me a job. So whatever audio you use for your podcast, never, ever, ever use the guy saying, "Let's get ready to rumble." Ever. That is the worst audio you can. Michael Buffer, according to the chat, is the guy there from Ready to Rumble. Thanks, Seth.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your wisdom. I know you're going to stick around for the rest of the show, but we appreciate you sharing that. And if anybody wants to check out Cody, please do so in any of the ways. You can usually just find him on the subway or sorry, not that type of way. You can find him on the Curiosity Daily podcast, as well as Game Life Balance US, which, for those of you not familiar with the GonnaGeek.com network, we have a bunch of amazing geeky content, including not Game Life Balance US, but no, there is another Game Life Balance podcast called Game Life Balance Australia. And in episode 67 this week, the boys discuss the massive influence that D&D had on video games and reminisce about some of their favorite D&D inspired games. Check out this and more in episode 67 of Game Life Balance Australia on GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
Welcome to this week's Better Podcasting Download.
Okay, this is fun. This is super fun, and we're going to make it as fast as possible because we know that you've seen some of these stories talked about elsewhere, so we don't want to waste your time, but we need to set up what we're about to discuss. That's right. The question is being asked, is video the king, or will podcasting persist? So we have a few highlights from news in the past couple weeks that might make you think that video is making a resurgence.
Right. So there's 4 stories that we'll just briefly frame the discussion with. First of all, Panoply, they shook up a lot of stuff and they basically got rid of their entire podcast creative team. I think they kept a couple, but the early reports where they were getting rid of everything. And to me, that says podcasting wasn't making them any money, so that they were moving on to something else that was making money. Now, iHeartRadio decided to go out and grab a bunch of podcasts that were making money, and it was the How Stuff Works brand, and they bought that. And I think in order to bolster their money making or the revenue for iHeartRadio, Buzzsprout also kind of did the same thing that Panoply did, and they cut out all their podcasting teams to focus on video. Now, I don't know if personnel are going to stay and they're going to move from podcasting to video or not, but they're getting rid of their podcasting arm and focusing on video. And then also, this is a gem that Steven found, which he's really just clamoring to talk about. It's YouTube fully commits to vertical video for promotions, and I think maybe they're only going to show it when you're in vertical mode on a mobile device, but I'm not sure about that. So there's a lot of podcasting kind of going down and people like searching for the money makers. And then there's video that's rising up from the ashes here. So that kind of frames the discussion here. Is video the future here? You're talking about Vimeo, you're talking about YouTube, or will podcasting persist for the long term? Now, Steven, you definitely have some ideas here. What do you think?
So I've noticed a bit of a resurgence myself in video over the last couple of years. That's something that I was surprised to see. We actually got into this discussion about a year and a half ago with some various people that you and I talk to regularly, one of them being Suncast over in the GFQ network. And it's something that I did notice was it seemed like a lot of podcasters were starting to get into it. Now, why I find that fascinating myself is because really, if you look at YouTube, it's been around for so long, and there used to be a lot of people who did sort of, they were vloggers, video bloggers. And then that faded, and then you got podcasters, and now podcasts are the next big thing. But you're seeing a lot of podcasters go into video again. So I think that podcasting is still going to be around for a long time. I think that what you'll probably see personally, this is my prediction, is you'll see more people doing like what we do here, which is offering two different versions of the same show. So like here, we do better podcasting. Yes, we just talked about some things that you could probably see on screen and whatnot, but we're very conscious of the fact that we have audio only listeners. But for those of the people who are watching the video side of things, they're not being like, oh, these guys only care about audio. Oh, look at them. They don't pay attention. No, we're also offering a video element. So you're getting that bridge. And I think that that's probably the direction it's going myself. I think that you're not going to see podcasting just go away altogether.
Cody, what are your thoughts?
I think we live in a hyper efficient culture. And I think that the fact that you can multitask while listening to podcasts is always going to have value to a lot of people. Where the peak is, where the plateau is, where the limit is, I don't know. But I think it's safe to say podcasting is going to stick around.
Yeah, I tend to side with Cody here in that the way that podcasts are consumed are where you can't watch video. So if you're mowing the lawn, you're in the gym, you're running, you're driving your car, you're in the subway, which I guess you can watch video at that point. But if you're changing trains, you want to concentrate on the visual sights around you. So you're probably just listening to podcasts or audiobooks or something like that. So I think that niche will maintain. And I think that the awareness of podcasts as it grows, and then people discover how they can get this free audio content that is available to them on their smartphones. I think eventually when people learn how to subscribe or learn how to play podcasts that way, I think that podcasts will reach their maximum. Now, I don't know what the maximum is. It's not going to be as good as video because there's a lot of consumption that happens with video all over the place. You can get that with your same smartphones wherever you are with these data packages that are going unlimited now. If you're going to school and you have a few minutes before class, you can watch a quick video. If you're on the subway, you can do this. If you're commuting that way, if you're at work and taking a break, you can watch a video. But for most of the time, for the rest of the day, you're listening to audio, whether that's podcasts, radio, whatever. So there's a balance here. And I don't know what ultimately that balance will get us. So I don't think podcasting is dead. I do see that video is a far more engaging platform as far as you're visually involved in the product as you're watching it. So I don't know. I don't know. Is it going to be 20-80%? I don't know if it's going to be 30-70. I don't know if it's going to be 50-50. There's going to be some break. And I don't think we're at that point. I think podcasting will continue to grow at the 3 to 5% a year until it reaches that maximum. Don't know what that maximum is.
And so the reason I think there's going to be a little bit more of a balance as well coming in is because if we look at the radio market and the way that some of those traditional radio stations and whatnot are diversifying their portfolio a little bit, I think you're seeing that. Like I know here with a lot of my local radio stations, many of them have started to do video clips afterwards, or they're doing live streams, even if it's just from an iPhone propped up in the studio, right? They're trying to get that attention elsewhere. And I think that the fact that you're seeing that happen with radio, I don't see why podcasting wouldn't be the same, where there'll be eventually a bit of a balance shift happen there as well. I want to make it clear. I didn't say that podcasting is going away. I just think that you're going to see that balance happen between audio only and video as well. I don't know. That's my thoughts.
And as far as the monetization goes, I think there is a better chance to monetize through video, especially with the live video streams, with like the super chats and with any other embedded and advertisements that you can click on the video. So I think that if you're monetizing, there's a bigger chance for that. But audio, there's always a chance to monetize with that too. You have seen it for years or heard it for years on AM radio or sports broadcasts or whatever, your FM stations. You're listening to music and it's cut up 27 times an hour with different advertisements. So I think the monetization is going to be the key here. And I think that is slightly tipped towards the video side of things, but that's just my 2 cents.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens, but all I know is that I will never, ever, ever support vertical video. It's just not going to happen. I refuse to support vertical video.
Have fun with your Pixel 3 XL that's going to have only vertical video supported.
Absolutely. Well, if you have a thought on this, please do get in touch with us through any of the ways. You can go ahead and you can find us at facebook.com/betterpodcasting. Head on over to betterpodcasting.com and comment there, or send us an email to podcast@betterpodcasting.com. We would love to know, what is your thoughts about the future of podcasting and possible video shift? Well, let's go ahead and move to our Better Pod Back, where we will talk about the poll that we had about social media. All right, we got on a Twitter last week and asked the following question, which was, where do you focus the most of your attention on social media for your podcast? And we asked Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or other. And unsurprisingly, probably because it was posted on Twitter, we had 68% of people say Twitter, 13% say Facebook, 9% said Instagram, and 10% were other. Social media guru Cody Gough, what's your thoughts?
I spent many years in a full-time career as a social media manager for a couple marketing agencies and a huge global marketing consulting firm. This isn't surprising me. I have never thought Facebook was a particularly good vehicle for marketing yourself. Right now, Facebook, and this is based on my current work and all the professional relationships I've had with Facebook through the radio station and through Curiosity and through all my other jobs, Facebook wants to keep you on Facebook. Their algorithm is designed to, if you're liking and commenting on something and watching a video native on the platform or going through photo galleries, that's where they want you. If you share a link to anything, anywhere that's not on Facebook, then it's going to get buried. I cannot tell you the number of times. If I go on Facebook right now and I post a plain text post, 1,000 people will see it. If I have a link in there to anything that's not Facebook, I might get 50 views. Literally, it's garbage. It's hot garbage. I will say, on one hand, I think Instagram's got a chance at driving some traffic, perhaps because of the Spotify integration. I don't know if you guys have played around with that a whole lot, but go in Spotify, find your podcast, tap share, and you share it to an Instagram story. So if someone taps on your Instagram story, they can pull up your podcast in Spotify. Only problem with that is Spotify metrics are not IAB compliant, and it has been hell trying to measure our listenership once we became available on Spotify. It's just not integrated into anything. I think Spotify is a huge headache. I would probably be better off if we didn't offer our show on Spotify. I have nothing good to say about Spotify. So it's like, okay, you market your podcast on Instagram, but it sends them to Spotify. Is there a net gain? Maybe someone knows about your show, but like it's not measurable or monetizable. So I have a huge issue with Spotify in the podcast space right now. That's a little off topic, but I think Twitter's great because when you tweet, people see your tweets. Oh my God. That's why it's the best social media in my eye.
Yeah. The verified one on the show would say that Twitter's the greatest. Yeah.
I think either for Twitter or Instagram, and I'm not sure about Facebook. I'm not a social media expert, but I've seen a lot more engagement when I post hashtags than when I don't post hashtags. So I am expanding my reach beyond the people that follow me by using the hashtag. And Cody, do you have any specifics about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually why when I initially started hobby podcasting, like forever ago, I didn't sign up for a Facebook page. I signed up for a Google Plus page, which not a lot of people use Google Plus, but they did at the time. And the thing about Facebook is when you're on Facebook, you're insular. You're involved with the people you're involved with. Maybe you're active in a couple Facebook groups with people you don't know very well, but those posts aren't usually showing up on your feed. And unless you have notifications set a certain way, typically you're engaging with your existing network. On Twitter, that's not the case at all. On Twitter, you're exploring. You're seeing what people are retweeting from other people. You're seeing what people are sharing. You're clicking on hashtags. Google Plus is the same way, or was the same way when it had a more active community. People were exploring hashtags. And Instagram's the same way. That's why if you're a bodybuilder on Instagram and you start posting fitness hashtags, people are going to find and follow you because they're searching for stuff and they're finding you based on interest. So they're more interest-based platforms. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I think any social media network where you see a lot of hashtag use and adoption and utilization is going to be far superior to Facebook. Facebook does support hashtags, but no one uses them. Same with LinkedIn. They added them too late. No one's used to using them. So, they're kind of throwaway.
And LinkedIn is a more professional social media. So I wouldn't want to put my Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. podcast out there. I might want to put better podcasting out there, but I wouldn't want to put Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. or Starling Tribune out there just because it's just not the right venue. If we had to run this poll again, I would try to run it on as many platforms as I could, not just Twitter. And then also for the other, I would have put other, and then in parentheses, and I don't know how many characters we could get away with, but other like Reddit. I would have added Reddit there in a jumble with others, and just seeing like Reddit, I think we might have gotten more than 10% with the other there.
I question Reddit being social media myself. I personally do. I don't know that I see it as social media.
I think it's like enough for social media to qualify for this post because it's a central place for everybody to go to. It's more form-based than social media, but as far as everybody else is concerned, it's just another app on their phone that they go to, and it's a common place that people go to that don't go to Google Drive or Google Plus, which I'd never go there myself either. But I wonder if Google Plus would have been another thing if we had enough characters. Others like Google Plus, Reddit, whatever. I think we would have gotten more than 10% there.
And that's the pitfall of the Twitter poll. You're limited to 4 options with very limited questions.
What about Tumblr?
Tumblr, there you go. But we also had in response to this some people reply, including Dad IO Podcast Ryan, who said, "Where's the option for MySpace?" Valid. We also had Diami Paloki say Twitter, though that's because I like it best, not because it's most effective. We had Ferris say, "I'm not even on Twitter." And he responded on Twitter. We had Suncast say Facebook and Twitter. Also noticed you specifically didn't make an option for Google Plus. Rightfully so. Zachary Webb say Twitter is the only one I have for the podcast, except Google Plus. And we had Evil Zombie say, "Does YouTube count as social media?"
That's a good question. I've heard arguments for and against, and for the purposes of this, I would have said no because it's a distribution place. It's not a place to promote.
Interesting point of view. And those were the responses that we had to that poll. So we want to know exactly how do you best promote your show? Where do you do that on social media? And also chime in on the Reddit. Is it social media? Is it not social media? We want to know. What do you think? And also, is YouTube social media or not? That is probably the more lively debate. Cody, what's your thoughts on that?
I have no thoughts on that. I think based on some interactions I had in the last week or so, I think Reddit is a hot trash fire, but I'm still a Redditor, but God, there are terrible people on that site. Oh, they're just so awful. God, I'm on Reddit every day. And so sometimes you forget and then you accidentally comment on something and then you look at the replies and you realize, oh, it's like the septic tank of humanity just swimming.
It depends on what subreddit you're on and how well curated it is, how well moderated it is. I think that really depends on whether you want to post there or not. And I would caution you to make sure you know what subreddit you're in and that you know if it's someplace where you want to post or not. I do want to actually go through one more bit of feedback that we got, and it was from Andrew Scott, and it plays off of our Periscope integration last week. He said, it's odd that Periscope audio doesn't play back for you. It worked for me on Mac. Now, Steven and I both tried to play back our Periscope on Chrome on a Windows device, and I've tried it various times, and it doesn't work. It does work in Internet Explorer on my Windows PC, and apparently it works even on Chrome for Bandrew over in the Mac world. So this whole integration of Periscope Live to Twitter has a little bit to go in order for get rock solid. And by the way, I've kind of refined my Periscope streaming here, and it's gotten better since last week, but it is still not intuitive, and you need to have experience, and you cannot monitor it. And I do not recommend it for somebody that doesn't know audio and doesn't know how to do a mix minus or stuff like that. So good luck if you're trying it. And if you have, please let us know what your experiences are.
That's a great point. So if you've had experiences, let us know through any of the ways that we previously mentioned. Well, Cody Gough, thank you very much for coming on here today. Before we wrap up, we'll give you one last opportunity to promote yourself, talk about yourself. Just give us another moment to look into your eyes.
Yeah, I mean, you already heard 18 different Curiosity Daily promos, but if you have an Echo device, an Amazon Echo, and you want to check us out as part of your flash briefing, a lot of people have really been enjoying that, so that's cool. But you can learn something new in just a few minutes every day on Curiosity Daily. It is what I do. But more than even promoting myself right now, like I have to promote this podcast, and I'm legitimately just have to tell your listeners that your show is the reason that I'm in this studio, that this studio was built. So thank you again. I'm a big fan of this show. I recommend it all the time. When people are like, oh, where do I go to listen to better podcasts? I just give them a better podcasting link. I'm like, just listen to this show. You will learn literally everything you need to know about podcasting. Why are you going elsewhere? It's dumb. So thank you guys. I will come on anytime to ramble about whatever. I really hope that promo talk was helpful. And podcasters, don't think radio people are your enemy. I have a lot of experience in both, and there is a lot you can learn from radio people. I know, a lot of longtime listeners to the show will know that, but legitimately, work together. There's no reason not to. That's all I got to say about that.
So says the double agent trader.
I mean, you know me too well.
So if you have not checked out Better Podcasting, Cody's telling you to check it out. Oh wait, that's not how the promo works, right? But there you go. So for episode 148 of Better Podcasting, I'm Stephen John Drew saying thank you very much for everybody who came by our live chat, which is on Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Oh, I'm Cody Gough. That's me. Look, it's me. Hey, that's me on the TV screen. I'm on the TV screen. Hi, Mom.
And I'm SP saying go check out the Curiosity Daily podcast and Ashley Hamer starring.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Better Podcasting. We want to hear from you. You can find all of our contact information at betterpodcasting.com. If you like the show, please consider giving us a 5-star review in iTunes. We encourage you to check out all of the other geeky podcasts available at GonnaGeekNetwork.com. This has been a GonnaGeek production. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next week.
These foam tiles, I don't know if you know this. If you're not a professional podcaster, is that a thing? Yes, it is. If you don't podcast yourself, or if you do podcast and you don't have these acoustic foam tiles, right? These acoustic foam tiles behind me in the background of my set, they're really great, right? They absorb a lot of sound, so there's not sound bouncing around a room. But adhesive typically is not compatible with the foam tiles. Super glue doesn't really work. Most types of super glue, you can't use tape. You can't use duct tape. It's actually really, really hard to actually affix these to anything. So what every guide on the internet says is to take 3M spray and just spray it real good and then stick it to, let's say, a cardboard, maybe a cardboard panel or something. So I cut out a bunch of big pieces of cardboard. I sprayed it thoroughly. I sprayed the cardboard and then I sprayed the foam thing and then I stuck them on, and they just fall off. They don't stay. And it's not like there's a huge fluctuation in humidity in this studio. I mean, it's the same room located in the same place. So they're if you see a podcaster setup with these things sticking to the walls really well lined up, that is impressive.
Okay.
Like, this is some impressive stuff.
So I wish we had time to make this as part of the show, but this is a pre-show ramble. But I just got to say that this goes to show, for those people who have a really crummy microphone, and rather than invest in a new microphone that might solve the problem, they put the money towards tiles, they should also plan on frustration. So it just goes to show that our advice of try the microphone first is better.
Yes, correct.
Okay, cool. Just to make sure.